What is up, guys? Bobgar here, and it is 10 ticket deck time again. $10 deck, if you will. We look at decks that are $10 on Magic Online, and this week we're looking at a user request for a version of modern white-black tokens that's in that range, and I think it turned out pretty well. This is a serious competitive deck just because the archetype is pretty, it's not a tier 1 deck, but it's probably would be considered a tier 2 or 3 deck, and I think even when you go budget, you can still keep it as pretty much a tier 2 or 3 deck and be very competitive in the modern format with this style of deck. So let's take a look at what the deck does, and we're going to start with the most obvious things in a white-black token deck. We're going to start by looking at the tokens. So we're running Raise the Alarms as a 4 of. This one's kind of a very simple classic card. It's an instant. Put 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. So pretty good turn 2 play. Sometimes you can catch your opponent off guard attacking with something you shouldn't be attacking with. And even if you can't, just putting in 2 1/1s is pretty good on their end step, and then you can obviously swing in with them the next turn or whatever. Next up, Gather the Townsfolk. We're running as a 2 of. This is basically the same as Raise the Alarm, except it needs to be used as a sorcery, which is actually a fairly big drawback. And it has another ability that I've only rarely seen very useful. If you've been watching the $10 10-ticket gauntlet we've been doing, Melissa actually got to cast a few of these and hit that Fateful Hour ability. But Fateful Hour is something I just almost never see end up being useful. But Fateful Hour is kind of cool. It says, if you have 5 or less life, put 5 of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. So basically it goes from being create 2 1/1s to being a create 5 1/1s if you have 5 life or less. Gets incredibly strong, but at that point in the game it also could be very well could be too late. Again, Sue, it could be good though. And then probably the most important token maker in our deck, we're running 4 Lingering Souls. Off of 1 card, you get to make up to 4 1/1 flyers, which is pretty powerful. But it does take 5 mana total to do that. But the nice thing is you can split it across turns. It costs 3 to play for its fair side, and then 2 to play from the graveyard. But super cool card, works in a lot of places, and so there's a reason for us to go black, because the flashback on it is black. So those are kind of our 3 earliest token makers, and some of our best token makers as well. And then we get into the big token makers. So Spectral Procession, it's kind of a turn 3 play, but a lot of times because of the awkward mana in the deck, it's going to end up being turn 4. We'll almost always have 3 white mana eventually, but a lot of times we'll end up with one of our utility lands or one of our 3 swamps that we run early on and just not be able to cast Spectral Procession at turn 3. So sometimes it gets pushed to turn 4, but even if it gets pushed to turn 4, create 3 1/1 flyers for 4 is fine. And on turn 3, obviously, it's just great. Hero of Bladehold are running as a 3 of for 2 reasons. One is a 4-drop, and we just can't afford to run that many 4-drops in the deck. And 2, it's a little expensive. So this is our 1 actual creature in the deck. It's a 3/4, but it's a creature that's also a token maker. And it's also an anthem. So it does a lot of things that we want our creatures in this deck to do. So when it attacks, you put in 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, tapped and attacking, they come in attacking. And in addition to that, all other creatures, including the ones you just created, get +1/+0 until end of turn. So if you have a board full of creatures, you attack with this thing, you turn all your 1/1 creatures into 2/1s and put out 2 more 2/1s attacking, you can get in for a lot of damage on turn 5. The big disadvantage is obviously there's no real board impact from Hero of Bladehold until turn 5, and it has to survive till then, has to not get papped and things like that. And since it's one of the only good targets for single target removal, it's definitely pretty reasonable to expect that it will get single target removed a lot of the time, but when it doesn't, it's great. Then we also run 2 Secure the Wastes as kind of our top end token maker. This can be used early on. Using it for 3 doesn't feel terrible, even though it just creates 2 1/1s and instant speed. But if you don't have anything else to do, and those are useful towards winning the game, a lot of times it makes sense to do that. And then obviously on turn 4+, you're creating 3 or more tokens at instant speed, and that is great. Basically, functionally, it's a lot like the Spectral Processions, because they're both usually about 4 mana, except this one's instant speed, but the tokens don't have flying. And like I said, if you top deck it really late game, you sometimes can just create 5 or 6 tokens, and that's just crazy good. So that's why it's in the deck as a 2 of. And then after all the tokens, we should talk about how we make them big, because 1/1 tokens, even though we're getting out a lot of them, have a little trouble closing out games. They mostly have flying, which is really nice, which lets them get in the air, but still, it'd be nice if we could pump them up. So the first one up is Intangible Virtue. This is the best token pump created, and it gives all of our tokens not only +1/+1, but also Vigilance. So we can not only attack with them, but also still hold them back to block if we need to. So that's super good. Honor the Pure for us is basically a less good version of that. It only affects white creatures, but all of the creatures in this deck are white. All of the tokens that we generate with this deck are white. So it gives them +1/+1 as well, but it does not give the Vigilance. And so that's the drawback of Honor the Pure. And then Zealous Persecution is an instant for 2 mana. That's kind of a combat trick that not only makes your creatures bigger, it also makes your opponent's creatures smaller. It does a lot of really good double duty against a couple decks like Elves or anything running a lot of mana dorks like Birds of Paradise and things like that, because it just like sweeps them off the board. And it's really good in the token mirror if they don't have their anthem effects out. So very good in a bunch of matchups, and it just anthems you for a turn. Usually on a turn you're going to get a kill, or a turn you can trade up with a combat, use it like a combat trick and trade up against an enemy creature is pretty powerful as well. Alright, and then we need to go to our early interactions. So one of the problems you'll have seen so far is our token generators don't start till 2, and our token pumps don't start till 2. So what do we do on turn 1? Well, we only have 7 1-drops in the deck, 4 Duress, so we can kind of pick apart our opponent's hand a little bit. Taking out the removal doesn't necessarily feel great unless we know we're going to hit a Hero of Bladehold on curve or something, but a lot of times there's a lot of other things you can hit. It's very good against a lot of the combo decks that are in Modern, like Living End and Storm and things like that, because we can pick apart the 1 or 2 cards they need to be able to get off their combo. Yeah, so just all around a pretty good card. It obviously has some disadvantages against Zoo decks, just because Zoo decks don't run a lot of non-creature spells, but against a lot of decks it's very good. And then 3 Ulcerate. So this was one of the hardest picks for me. I really needed another 1-drop. Most of the 1-drops that White-Black tokens usually run are just priced out. Those include Path to Exile, priced out. Better hand disruption like Thoughtseize and Inquisition of Kozilek. Again, they're priced out. And then I started looking at other 1-drop removals. I started with Oust, and I played with Oust a little bit, and it just did not impress me. It is a tempo play, and we are kind of a tempo deck. Like, we want to get out to a certain point, and then we just win. But it was still just a little bit too weak against so many decks. And then Dismember is another one that we could have run, but that one's priced out again. I thought about, what's it called? The one that gives -2/-2 instead of -3/-3 until end of turn. And that one might have been fine. I definitely feel like that would have been an okay choice. But there were enough things that were 3/3s that I really wanted to be able to get rid of in instant speed that I thought Ulcerate was a pretty good way to go. The one that jumped to mind when I put in Ulcerate was Baral, Chief of Compliance against Storm, as I really wanted a way to deal with that at instant speed before he could go off and combo off on us turn 3, because we're not going to be able to win that early, so we need to hold up a little bit of disruption against decks like that. And then 3 Go for the Throat, which are pretty much just 2 mana, kill anything. It doesn't work against artifacts, so it sucks if we run into Affinity, but otherwise it's a great card. Just a really, really strong 2 mana removal. And so that's all our early interaction. That's all the non-land cards for the deck, and then we have to look at the lands. So Caves of Koilos, we don't like costing ourselves life, but we need cheap dual lands for the deck because we really want to hit our black and not invest too many swamps in it, because we have too many cards that require us to have white. So we run 4 Caves of Koilos. Next up, Temple of Silence. I was a little skeptical about running these in the deck, but after I tried it, I was basically looking for cheap white-black dual lands. Temple of Silence is one of the cheapest. And after I tried it, I actually felt really good about it because we don't have very many turn 1 plays. And Temple of Silence is a great turn 1 play. It's just gets you a free scry to set up your next couple of draws, helps you find more mana if you need it, helps you find more threats if you need it. Just kind of gets you whatever you need, and is basically, you can almost think of it as being like a 1 mana scry 1, which isn't great, but it's combined with I guess it's a one mana put a land in place tapped scry 1. So it's pretty good. And then Vault of the Archangel as a 2 of. I can splitting this with Vesperial Abbey, although Vesperial is still slightly more expensive. I think it's going down as it starts to get close to rotation. And it might be correct to split 1 and 1, but I went 2 Vault of the Archangel here. The thing that I like about it more than the lifelink, is definitely the Death Touch. You can't do it till turn 5, but turn 5 sometimes giving all your guys Death Touch means like your opponent can't block the way they would want to block, or you can just hold your guys back and swing with all your air guys and then keep all your other guys back enough to just block his giant creatures and then just give them all Death Touch so his creatures die anyway and things like that. So it makes combat pretty hard for your opponent, especially I like it swinging in against opponents before you've played down your card for the turn. So, you know, you can force them in a situation where if they feel like they have to block, they lose their creature in a bad trade. And if they don't block, you don't have to activate the ability anyway, and you get to play whatever you had in your hand that you wanted to play. So I find it works pretty favorably in the deck. And then the basic lands, we're not going to spend too much on this slide. 9 plains, 3 swamps. I upped the number of swamps slightly. Originally I was at 10 and 2, but I upped the number of swamps when I added the Ulcerates over the ousts, basically the more black removal over white removal, because now we are kind of heavy. We only need really 1 black mana, but we do really want to get a black mana, so up my black count a little bit. I've been liking it so far. And then we're going to move on to looking at the deck as a whole. So I added a slide here. This is a screenshot from Magic Online. I partly did that just so we could see the curve a little bit, because when you talk about these cards in the various ways we talk about them, sometimes it's hard to see the curve. You could almost move those Temple of Silences over to the 1-drop, so you end up with a slightly more smooth curve around that. Obviously I split out the lands to 2 different piles. That's not really important. It just makes it easier to see them all. But yeah, you can kind of see 2 is really our hot spot. Lingering Souls also drops down to being castable at 2 once you play it for fair at 3 once. So a lot of times turn 4, you know, you'll like turn 2 you'll play like Raise the Alarm. Turn 3 you'll play Lingering Souls. Turn 4 you'll play both Intangible Virtue and Flashback Lingering Souls, and then you'll have a huge force. So it's not uncommon turn 4 to actually play 2 2-drops. So that's kind of how the curve looks. And then we'll go into sideboard. We're running 2 Bojuka Bog, 2 Ghost Quarters. Bojuka Bog gets rid of opponents' graveyards. Ghost Quarters gets rid of opponents' troublesome lands, especially against things like Tron. 3 Brave the Elements helps our creatures survive against removal or things like that. Just helps them swing through opponents too. Protection from a color I find just often very, very useful. 3 Fragmentize to deal with artifacts and enchantments. Super important against some decks. Anything that's going to try to lock us out with things like Ensnaring Bridge or Blood Moon. Blood Moon is actually not good against us because we run so many basics, but you know what I mean. Just like Worship, any of those, like there's a bunch of enchantments that are just like make it super hard for us to win, and this comes in against those. A Go for the Throat in the sideboard as well. Obviously, we're running 3 main boards. Sometimes we just want to up our removal count slightly, and I thought it was worth putting in there. And 2 Oblivion Rings. Obviously, we have a lot of removal anyway. Oblivion Rings only really useful if we really need to exile something, or if they have Planeswalkers. And those are the 2 cases where Oblivion Ring comes in. Admittedly, we're pretty strong against most Planeswalkers anyway, because a lot of our guys have flying. But especially things like Yujin are going to be hard for us to stick creatures against. So that's kind of where Oblivion Ring comes in. And here's a look at the price in this whole deck. It's about $12.50 online and about $60 in paper. I'm going to make an amendment to that paper cost in just a second. And this is, like I said, only 3 creatures. It's almost all spells. Most of the spells are token generation, then a little bit of removal and a little bit of hand disruption. And then a few enchantments to pump up our creatures as well in Honor the Pure and Intangible Virtue. I left Lingering Souls as kind of the headlining card here because I think it's overall probably the strongest card in the deck. Certainly Intangible Virtue could have been listed there as well. And Hero of Bladehold might have made a prettier picture. But yeah, I think Lingering Souls deserves that spot. All right, and so let's look at this slide. So this slide is me comparing the price of Hero of Bladehold with Sorin Solemn Visitor. This is the paper price. So online, Hero of Bladehold I think is like 50 cents. Let me check this slide back here that we just looked at. Hero of Bladehold, I guess it's up to like $1.50 or so. It was 50 cents when I bought them, I think, but it must be spiking slightly. But still, online, Hero of Bladehold's $1.50. Sorin Solemn Visitor is basically the same price it is in paper, like $4.50. And so I ran Hero of Bladehold because that's the thing that fits into our budget. But in paper, I actually think Sorin Solemn Visitor is a better choice for a 4-drop. It's harder to interact with, like you can't just use single target removal on it. It can create tokens if it needs to. It has immediate board impact with the +1/+0 and lifelink. I find Sorin Solemn Visitor to just be a better card in this deck than Hero of Bladehold, and in paper it's actually cheaper. So if you're buying this deck in paper, you'll save almost $10. You'll be down around 50 instead of 60 if you just swap out the Hero of Bladeholds there for Sorin Solemn Visitor, and I think that is a very good switch. So I just wanted to point that out here. I do love Hero of Bladehold. I think she's great, but you know, online she's super cheap. Like I said, I swear I bought mine for 50 cents, but it listed $1.50 on the last page, so maybe that's what she is now. But you know, certainly you can get her cheap online, but Sorin you cannot, which is the reason I made the decision I did. But if you're buying in paper, pick up the Sorins. He is both cheaper and better. All right, then I wanted to go over matchups. I think against Burn, we're a little bit too slow, and our creatures aren't going to help us stabilize very much. I think he's just going to cast his non-creature burn spells and get us down and get us killed. Against Zoo, I think we have enough chance to stabilize that I gave us a check mark. I think we're relatively okay against those decks. Against kind of Control, I gave us a tilde. I thought about giving us a check. I don't think we're terrible against Control. We have enough that we can do it instant speed at the end of their turn to dodge sweepers. We have some grindy cards like Lingering Souls. In general, it doesn't seem like a terrible matchup. They often run a bunch of single target removal too, which is just basically dead against us. So yeah, it's definitely not a bad matchup, but I'm not sure it's worth giving a check mark to. So I gave it the old tilde. Combo is one of our weakest matchups. We have a little bit of that hand disruption and a few creature kills, which can sometimes matter against those decks, but we're pretty slow. We're not going to win till turn 5 a lot of the time, and a lot of combos just win before turn 5, and we can't interact with that well. Like, what do we do against Ad Nauseam? We maybe turn 1 Duress and hope that they happen to have their combo stuff in hand and not just some search or something, but a lot of times we'll just miss. So that's the way combo goes. I think, we certainly can beat those decks. We have a little bit of interaction, but I don't think we have enough to be favorable. And then mid-range, I think, is where the deck really shines. Like, oh, Liliana makes a sack a creature. Oh, they fatal push to token. Like, it has a lot of grindy single target removal and then card advantage sometimes, but not card advantage that we really care that much about. Like, if they're using Dark Confidants and whittling down their own life to draw more creature removal, even if they draw their extra 2 fatal push, each of those fatal pushes only kills 1 creature token, and we're just going to get Secure the Waste and cast it for 5, and they're never going to catch up with that. So I don't think those mid-rangey decks are well suited against us. I think they can win, certainly. They're just good decks overall. They can beat just about anybody, but I think we're favored against those matchups because of just the game that they want to play not matching up with the game that we're playing. And so that's the deck for the week. I'm going to look at the suggestions again, just to show you that I do take viewer requests. Some of these are obviously X'd out now. We did Sundial the Infinite last week, and I thought it turned out really well. We did a White Blue Control for the Encyclopedia a little while ago. We did a Core Tribal for Tom Slipknot 1. I thought that turned out amazingly well. And this week, obviously, we are doing White-Black tokens for Segvan. This is a deck that I had originally... So I had to revise it and go over it again this week, but I had written it way back when I started this show, probably 8 months ago. I don't even remember when it was. It was a long time ago. Maybe, actually, probably more than 8 months ago at this point. So I had to kind of go back and revise it and change some things out and tweak it and try to get it polished to the point where I was happy with it. But this is a deck that I've been meaning to do since the inception of the show. White-Black Tokens is a deck you can build cheap. It's actually competitive and modern. It's a lot of fun. It feels fair. One of the other problems we have is sometimes some of the decks on this channel, which, don't get me wrong, I love this, but I realize it can be a little boring if they're all like this, is I run a lot of unfair decks that win some of the time just because of how unfair they are. And it's like, well, did your opponent draw the card to stop your unfair thing? Nope, they lose. Did you draw your unfair thing? Oh, you win. Like, even the Core Tribal feels like that a little bit, and so does Sundial of the Infinite with that Infinite combo. Those aren't the best examples. The better examples are like Angel Reanimator or any of those like super combo decks. But yeah, I think Black-White Tokens is a good, fun, interactive deck. It has a relative amount of skill to play, and it's just an enjoyable deck to play. So I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech. I'm going to play some games over the course of the week. I hope you tune in and watch them, and I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, Bobgar here. I just really wanted to quickly say, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you enjoy my content in general and would like to see more of it, subscribe. I'll be coming out with more content in the future. And please leave me comments and let me know what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, both in terms of production and in terms of my play and my deck building and all that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys next time.